Good morning, dear children. After winding up with the dimensions of business environment, the topic for today is the new economic policy. We had our economic policy, but then after the crisis, there were certain changes made in the economic policy, and the resultant we got was the new economic policy NEP 1991. The only topic that is included from NEP in this chapter of business environment is the changes, the features of the new economic policy, as in the new changes that were made in this policy. So the three major components that were included and the three major components that are included in our syllabus also are L, P and G. Although the term LPG is not new for any one of us because we've already studied this in class 10th, but still it is a part of our syllabus and hence we will go through it. So I repeat once again, children, the new economic policy 1991, there were certain changes made in the economic policy, and out of all the changes in our syllabus, the features that we need to remember for our board examination point of view is the three major components that were included to remove the crisis before 1991. So the three major components are L, P and G: liberalization, privatization and globalization. So as we all know, the word liberalization refers to end of license, quota and many more restrictions and controls that were put on industries before 1991. And just because of this licensing, there were various entrepreneurs who could not establish their industries. Hence, just after this quota, the controls and the restrictions were removed, when the trade was liberalized, when the trade was set free after 1991, Indian companies got liberalization. They were liberalized in the following ways. You can, if you want, you may even note down, or otherwise I'll be sending you the notes as well. So they got liberalization, children, in the form that the license was abolished. There was no license except a few industries. There was no license on any industry. There was no restriction on expansion or contraction of business activities. Then the reduction of tax rate and lifting of unnecessary controls of the company were taken care of. So the imports and the exports were also liberalized, as in they were not tax free, but yes, the taxes were a bit reduced so that more and more entrepreneurs could take part in export and imports. Then easy and simplifying the procedures to attract foreign capital in India. So in order to attract the foreign capital, there were easy procedures which were introduced under liberalization. Then the movement of goods and services across our country, moreover even abroad, they were made easy and simplified. Then there was freedom given to the industries in fixing up the prices for the goods and services. So this is all about liberalization. Now we have the second major component, and that is privatization. So privatization refers to giving greater role to the private sector, yes, and reducing the role of public sector. So to execute the policy, children, of privatization, government took certain steps. So I'm sure you all must have studied, but again, those steps were disinvestment. Again, disinvestment is not a word new for all of us. Disinvestment of public sector means when a government disinvest as in removal of investment, you withdraw your investment. So disinvestment of the public sector, that is transfer of public sector enterprises to private sector. The interest from the public sector, the investment from the public sector was withdrawn. And there was a board set up which was BIFR. BFIR refers to Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction. So basically, this board was set up to revive or to close sick units. Now, sick units refers to those units or those institutions, those enterprises which are no more profit earning, right? So those units which were no more profit earning for the government, those were sent to BIFR, that is Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction, to revive or to close those units in the public sector enterprises who were suffering losses. All right. Then dilution of stake of the government. Now, children, you need to understand here, when I talk about privatization, we talked about disinvestment, we talked about setting up of BIFR, but you need to understand the third point here in privatization, that there were chances of dilution of stake of the government, which means that in case of privatization, if the private sector acquired more than 51% shares, then it would result in transfer of complete ownership and management to the private sector. So this means dilution of the stake of government, which means if the private sector holds more than 51% of shares, the complete control of those units would be transferred easily to the private sector, and hence privatization. Then the third major component we have is globalization. So children, globalization refers to when various economies across the world are integrated together for one common purpose, and that is trade. So you must remember that before 1991, India was very strict regarding its policies, for import and exports. But just after 1991, when globalization was introduced, it had to become a bit liberal, and it became liberal in its trade with other countries through various ways. And few of them were that import was liberalized, then export duty was abolished, there was reduction in the import duty. So as a result of globalization, children, physical boundaries and political boundaries remained no barrier for any business enterprise, and the whole world became a global village. So globalization involved a greater interaction and interdependence among the various nations of global economy. So the three major components of new economic policy are L, P and G: liberalization, privatization and globalization. So the type of questions that you'll get from this topic would be, again, identifying which component of NEP is being discussed in the case study. And moreover, we are studying, children, the new economic policy because we are studying the chapter business environment. So this new economic policy, I'm sure you all must have understood by now, was a major change in the economical environment of our country. So how can this change in the economic environment not affect the business and industry? Hence, the next important topic that we need to cover is what was the impact of this change. This was a change in the economic environment. So this would have both direct and indirect effect on the business performance. So the next topic that we need to cover is the impact of the changes in NEP on business and industry. What was the effect of the changes that were made to NEP and the effect on business and industry, that how these changes affected business and industry. The first impact of the change that was made to new economic policy 1991 was that there was a tremendous increase in the competition. So children, after the new economic policy 1991, our Indian firms, our Indian companies, had to face an all-round competition. Now, what is all-round competition? All-round competition refers to competition from the internal market. They were already facing, right? But now, after the new economic policy, they had to face competition from the MNCs, multinational companies, from all the companies abroad. So the companies which could adopt the latest technology, which could adapt the changes according to the changing environment, could only survive and face the competition. And many companies could not face the competition, and the ones who could not face, children, they had to leave the market. Yes, so just after the new economic policy, the major impact in our Indian economy was that the competition for our Indian economies rose tremendously. So the children's second impact of changes in the new economic policy was that the consumers in our economy became more demanding. Now you need to understand this point this way, that before 1991, when there was licensing, when there was quota system, when there were so many restrictions on opening up of industries, that time, prior to the new economic policy, there were very few industries, and hence limited production was there. So as a result of shortage of production in every sector, the market was producer oriented, because whatever the producers had produced, now consumers had to buy the same. So producers became key persons in the market. But what happened after new economic policy? Liberalization. The restrictions were removed, licensing was removed, hence more and more producers, more and more industries, moreover multinational companies could get the chance to enter into our Indian economy. So this situation led to basically from shortage to surplus, because earlier there were only few industries, but after new economic policy, more and more companies were able to enter into India, and hence the production, which was a shortage, was not a problem anymore. So now the Indian customers who could now have the products in bulk could also compare the products, right? And the market also went into orientation, because from producer oriented, now the market was buyer oriented. So the market became customer oriented, and many more new schemes were made by companies to attract the customers. So when the customers were in a position to compare the products, obviously they became more and more demanding. So the second change, the second impact of the new economic policy was the customers became more and more demanding. Children, the third impact of the NEP on business and industry, apart from increased competition and more demanding customers, was rapidly changing technological environment. Now children, very clear, very clear rather, that before the NEP, before the new economic policy, there was a small internal competition only. That is, the Indian entrepreneurs were facing competition, from their only Indian competitors. But after the new economic policy, the world class competition started, and to stand this global competition, the companies had to adopt the world class technology. So to adopt and implement the world-class technology, children, the investment in research and development department had to increase. So this technological change became a necessity. So the first three changes, the first three impacts or effects of NEP are increased competition, more demanding customers, and there was a rapid change in the technological environment. Why? Because to face the global competition, the investment of the companies in research and development had to increase. So for today, we will be doing just the first three impacts or the effects on NEP, and the rest will be continued tomorrow in the next video. So just a quick revision, children. The features, the major components of the new economic policy were L, P and G: liberalization, privatization, globalization. We must know the meanings carefully, the keywords carefully, so that we could identify LPG in the case studies, and the first three effects of the new economic policy on business and industry. Thank you.